Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hands on SAP Dev with me, DJ Q Macro, here for part two as it says here, part two over there, basic operations. So we're digging a little bit more into OData. We had a really fun session. Excuse me, really fun session last Friday when we sort of just took a gentle introduction, had some brilliant discussion. So thank you everybody for joining in then and putting forth your questions and your comments and your observations. It's really, really good. I'm hoping for more of that throughout this series. Got a frog in my throat. So good morning to Andrew and Enric and Peter and everybody here. Good morning to Barcelona. So yeah, I'm really, really happy to have you all here. We're going to take our time again, not rush through things, have as much conversation as we can. And don't forget, all beginners are welcome, and there's no question that's too simple. So, ask any questions. I may not be able to answer them, but that's just me. Or people in the chat, people in our Hands on SAP Dev live stream community may be able to answer them. But today we're going to continue really from where we left off last Friday. And as the little sticker there, number 2, basic operations, sort of says, we're going to start looking at some of the basic OData operations and system query options and things like that, but we'll get to that. Good morning to Joe and Jonas and Ashish and Flatline. Good morning again, Flatline. You had some great questions last Friday. And Javier, good morning. Warm greetings from Barcelona. It's quite cold here. I was going to take this off, this cardigan thing. But I don't want to because it's quite cold. It's probably about, I don't know, maybe 11 degrees here, which is fine. It's not raining yet. So yeah, let's get started. Let me just switch to the main scene. I think I've got, let's open up a Chrome tab over here. Oh, not that one, a new one. And I switch back there, put that back over there again. There we go, perfect. By the way, there's this Friday's weekly developer news is out, so let me just share that URL with you. Let's just stop that there. Of course, go and watch the news. Good morning, Nico, and welcome. There's the news there. Perfect. All sorts going on all the time. All news all the time. Where was that phrase from? Anyway, so yeah, let me grab where we let me go to where we left off last time, which was we'd cloned this simple repository here. In fact, github.com SAP samples, OData basics, hands on SAP Dev. Let me share that with you as well. And Hussein, good morning. Flatline says GraphQL versus OData. Shots fired. Yeah, definitely. We like debate and we like sort of, things that make us think. So absolutely. Ciao, good morning to you as well. So yeah, we started out cloning this simple repo, this repository from SAP samples, and we cloned it into VS Code. I'm going to use VS Code again, just so for consistency. So this is where we left off. We've got here the README. Where's the README? Open preview. Oh, the preview's open already. Fool, DJ. And I've got a terminal here, and we saw in the preview that in order to get this up and running, this little basic OData service, all you need to do is run the CDS deploy to SQLite. Okay, that's because we want some persistence. We don't want to go all out and have proper, enterprise grade persistence at the HANA scale. We just want somewhere to store some data so that we can eventually do more OData operations than just read operations. We want to be able to write and update and delete, right? So that's why we're using a persistence layer in the form of SQLite. And if we run CDS run, we will start up our little CAP-powered server here, which is on localhost 4004. I think we've had this conversation before about why the CAP team chose 4000. It always interests me what ports people choose. Is there a meaning behind them? Of course, port 80 or 8080. Sorry, port 8000 or 8001 or 8080. Those are sort of logically an extension of port 80. So port 80 is the default HTTP port, but of course, you know, if you're running your own sort of web server, and not as a root user, you can't bind, you don't have permission to bind to ports lower than 1024. So, you know, quite often you will choose a port, well, you'll have to choose a port that's above 1024. And because 8080 and 8000 are a bit like 80, as it were, you know, that's why a lot of web servers that run in, you know, user space listen on 8000 or 8080, for example. So I quite like this 4004, which is different. GraphQL is overrated. Hype. Ooh! So I love these comments from Flatline. There is some excitement. I'm not going to use the word hype about GraphQL, although there is hype about GraphQL. There's hype, you know, and rightly so. You know, it's quite exciting. It's quite a departure from what we've seen before in many ways. In other ways, not. There is a lot of hype. There is a lot of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, oh yeah, let's all jump ship to GraphQL because, oh, REST and OData and HTTP are rubbish now. Let's go to GraphQL. You know, what? So, you know, there's possibly space in this universe for both approaches. You know, they're quite orthogonal to each other. We discussed that a little bit last time as well. But GraphQL is overrated. It's almost like one of those titles in a, you know, at school. You know, GraphQL is overrated. Discuss. You know, which I would love as a paper to write. Anyway. So we've got this 4004. Does anybody know why it's 4004? Let me know. Let me know. I think I may have given this away before, a long time ago. I did ask the CAP Papa, Daniel Hutzel, why he chose 4004. I guessed wrong. I guessed that it was because Intel's first integrated circuit CPU was the 4004 back in the early 70s. You know, we've got the Intel 8080, for example. There was the 4004 before that. And anyway, you know, let's not go there. So let's connect to this. Oh, there we go. Let's go over there again. Right, let's connect. Let's put that over there. Let's connect. Yeah, there we go. So when we go to localhost 4004, we get this nice little sort of, you know, launching point to have a look at whatever the CAP application is serving. And this is what we looked at last week. And just as an example, you know, this is, let's just see that this data there, you know, we've got this data, and it's quite small, I'll make it big, a lot bigger, right? So we've got data, we've got products data in this thing here, we've got suppliers, and we've also got categories, okay? It's quite easy to understand, right? So we're going to be playing around with those shortly. We've also got this wonderful Fury preview mechanism that comes sort of built in for free, as it were, which is really useful, and it uses Fury elements to bind to these OData entity sets, these endpoints, these resources in a wonderful way. But instead of looking at the Fury preview, I want to sort of walk before we can run. So I've created, and this is also in the repo, quite a simple application, which is available in the URL simple app. Okay. So by the way, I think if I'd have named, in fact, let's go here. If I'd have named the this HTML file index.html, it would have been served at this point instead of this nice little landing page here. But so I've deliberately called it simple app, so it's not index.html, so we still get access, a nice little clickable access to all the different areas of our OData service. And if you remember from last week, there are two quote-unquote well-known OData endpoints, as well as all the endpoints for the entity sets and functions and actions and all these different things as well. Functions and actions, you know, we're going to talk about functions and actions, not today, but you know, eventually. You know, keep it nice and simple, basic operations today. So we've got access to, remember what this is called? This document here, very, very similar to the Atom. So it's a service document, okay? So this really tells us what entity sets are available in this particular OData service that's served at this particular base URL, localhost 4000 Northwind-model. By the way, the reason it's called Northwind-model is simply because in my, if I close that, in my schema here, I've got the Northwind namespace with the different entities, products, suppliers, and categories, but that namespace is not to be confused with so the schema is at the persistence layer, the data definition, what shape the data is at the persistence layer effectively, or near the persistence layer. One layer above that is the service layer, where we can define our services, different views, different ways into that schema. So in our main.cds here, I'm pulling in the Northwind namespaced stuff from a schema, and I'm defining a service called Northwind model. And the way that service is exposed by CAP automatically, unless I say otherwise, is to sort of split that out into, camel case. This is camel cased, right? Split that out into 2 words, Northwind-model, okay? So Andrew says, I think I'll grab a glass of Riesling. I don't know how you pronounce that even. And yes, it is after 5 p.m. where I am. Yes, and Andrew, you're very welcome. And in fact, when I use the wine glass emoji, I think I put something on LinkedIn just before and on here as well. I was thinking of you, and also maybe Phil, because it is wine o'clock over there. So we've got this, and we've got this service document. If we go back here, we've also got the metadata document. And we've seen the metadata document. We had a brief look at that last week, and we also had some good questions about whether we can get the metadata in JSON format, and the answer was yes, you can, but it's quite rare to see that facility. Notice that by default as well, and this whole series is not about CAP, but CAP plays a very important role because it's providing us with the OData service, right? And it will by default provide us with a version 4, OData v4, okay? OData service. So Javier says, hey DJ, do you have Kima in the roadmap of your Great Friday live shows? Ooh, I don't at the moment, but if that's something that we want to have a look at, later this year, sort of fundamentals, let me know. Yeah, I mean, obviously you've let me know there, sort of implicitly. Maybe we'll drag on my colleague, Kevin Musick, who's a big, I've just initiated Google. Cabbage? To Wikipedia. Cabbage? What is going on? Google, what is going on? I didn't say cabbage. What did I say? Anyway, that's freaky. That's a really good. So somebody on the chat, remind me later today or whatever to speak to Kevin, and maybe we'll do it together or something. I don't know. So Nikhil, Andrew, in the words of Johnny Depp, isn't happy hour anytime? I don't know. Anyway. So we have, okay, Javier, brilliant. Okay, thanks. That's a good suggestion, actually. So we've got our metadata, and we had a brief look at the metadata. We've got this, I think it's important to sort of take our time and stare at this stuff. We did stare a little bit at it, but effectively, and XML is always a little bit more difficult for humans to look at, but because of this extension, which we talked about last week, you can sort of see the structure and how these things fit together. So in fact, we can see, you can double click these things here, right? So if I can double click that whole thing, the whole thing collapses. So we'll use that very briefly to sort of explore explore at a high level the metadata, and then we've got something quite exciting. I only discovered this week, so we'll have a play with that as well. So Flatline says annotation file CDS produces, and this OData metadata info has any connection. If it is, can you cover how they to relate? Yes, annotations. We'll look at annotations, not today probably, but as long as I remember. We can look at annotations, which is moving a little bit away from OData and more towards consumption of OData, but yeah, it's still all part of the same mix, right? So yeah, definitely. So we have this EDMX document, entity data model. In there, we've got this data services. It's really just the next direct child, and then in here we have the schema, the data definition, and in here we've got three entity type definitions. And also an entity container, okay? So we've got like type definitions, and then based upon these type definitions, let me just expand categories, for example, right? Entity type, name, categories, key. And by the way, this is just convention, it's not a rule, but when you build a service with CAP, an OData service, the CAP convention the suggestion is to call the entities, to name them in plural. That's why here, if we have a look at the entity definition here, entity products, plural, entity suppliers, plural, entity categories, plural. So if you were to look at, for example, the original Northwind OData service, I think these entity types, the names would be singular, okay? But don't let that, upset you or confuse us. Andrew says, can there be multiple schema within the EDMX? Yes, I've seen EDMX with multiple schemas. It's not very common, but yes, you can. Because you can basically have different namespaces defined. You have this schema namespace equals Northwind model, which again comes from the service definition. So yes. So we've got the categories entity type definition here. We've got 3 properties: category ID, category name, and description. And we're also saying that the category ID is the key. Okay, but then let's collapse that again and have a brief look at the entity container. Okay, all these names: entity container, entity type, entity set. They'll eventually become second nature, okay? Especially entity set and entity itself, okay, which we'll look at shortly. So this entity container is really defining 3 collections, 3 entity sets, 3 sets of entities. We've got the products entity set, which basically consists of the entity type products. Obviously, the same goes for suppliers. It consists of, so it's basically like the entity type is the definition. Then you have an entity, like a product entity, and these entities are all contained or collected into a set called an entity set. And an entity and an entity set, those are the 2 main resource types. I'm going to say resource types that that you will normally consume, as in read and or write or delete or whatever, in an OData service, and we'll go straight onto that in a second. And as you can see here as well, a really important thing to know when you're looking at entity sets is what they're also may be related to. So we've got this navigation property binding. In fact, let's have a look at the categories here. We can see that, in fact, when I said there are 3 properties, there are 4 properties. I apologize. Category ID, category name and description, and that's an integer, a string, and a string. But we've also got a link from category to products, okay? And you can see also the type. Again, we don't have to learn this XML here, but we can get a suggestion in our minds that categories is linked to products, and one category points to a collection, potentially, of products, a one-to-many relationship, okay? So Nikhil says, so a single entity definition from the ABAP world is an entity type here, and an entity set is an entity. Well, the first part of what you said, spot on, right? A single entity definition in the ABAP world is an entity type, exactly. It comes out in OData as an entity type. But there's a difference between an entity set and an entity. In fact, before I go to where I was going to go with this in a second, somebody remind me in the chat, I was going to show this really cool new CDS graphical modeler that's available for VS Code, which we can look at this metadata, and instead of looking at it in XML, we can look at it in a graphical format. How cool is that? So remind me in about 2 minutes, otherwise I'll forget. So to sort of dig into the second part of Nikhil's question, let's go back and have a look at products, because it's the first one. So we can see here that we have a resource, okay? The resource is, in fact, let me get rid of the question mark top equals 11 for a second. We're not going to go there yet. So here's our products resource. The representation of this resource that we've requested sort of implicitly is JSON. Remember, a resource is something you can, get, put, post, and delete. And the representation is, what content type that is. These are fundamental differences between resources and representations, and that's part of the heart of what representational state transport, REST, is all about, right? Anyway, and this is partly in the area of why OData is actually quite a good example of a RESTful API style protocol. Anyway, so we got this resource products, okay? And this resource, when we request it, we get a JSON representation in the response, and it's a list of products, right? There's the products. boysenberry spread, organic dried pears, cranberry sauce, Kobe Niku, Ikura, queso cabrales, and so on, right? Multiple things. And you can see actually the representation here. You have some metadata, okay, that gets supplied sort of automatic. Well, yeah, sort of automatically. We'll look at what part of the request tells the server, please send back in the response these at prefixed bits of metadata. We won't go into that right now. The key thing is that we get this value property in this object here, and the value is an array of objects, each object being a product, each object being an entity. So this thing that we're looking at right now is an entity set, also known as a collection. Okay, you'll find different terminology over the years. So a collection, entity set, same thing, same concept. Entry or entity, same thing, same concept, single thing. What JSON? Oh, Nico, you asked a similar question about my XML display. I'm using what's it called? I don't even know. JSON Viewer. JSON Viewer. How do I go to JSON Viewer? Chrome extension JSON Viewer. JSON Viewer. There we go. Well, let me share that with you as well. That's the is that the one? JSON Viewer? No, it's not JSON. No, wait a minute. JSON Viewer. Is it that one? It's the one with, it's like this circle thing. What is it? This like sort of circle. JSON Viewer. Maybe they've changed the logo or something because it's the same sort of thing. No, that's not it either. JSON Viewer. How do I JSON Viewer? What's that? Remove from Chrome, manage extension. Can I see it there? Background page. What? JSON Viewer. How do I go to source Chrome Web Store? Come on, Chrome Web Store. Viewing Chrome Web Store. There we go. Viewing Chrome Web Store. There it is. That's the one. This is the one that I've been using for a long time. I think it's really good. You know, other JSON viewers are available, but I think that one's really nice. I use it all the time. So that's that. There we go. Okay, so this that we're looking at right now is an entity set. Now, if I wanted a single entity, I could specify, and this is, for those who know, this is like old style, I can specify the ID or the key of that particular entity. So let's say we wanted, I don't know, aniseed syrup. So the product ID, which we know is the key from having looked at the metadata before, put the key in brackets and have a look. What is the difference here? What is the difference? The difference is that we get some metadata there, but we don't get an array of things. We get a single object because you've got one thing, one product. So Javier, DJ, remember to show us the new CDS schema graphics viewer. Thank you to be brilliant, Javier. Thank you very much. So actually, yes, let's have a look at that now. We'll come back to this in a second. So CDS graphical modeler site blogs.sap.com. There we go. I think it's this one. Yes. So this blog post came out recently. Let me share that. Flatline says, old style? What is the new style? Oh, wait till you see the new style, Flatline. Yes, this is the only style. Well, it was the only style I know as well. But anyway, okay. So there, introduction to CDS graphical modeler for Visual Studio Code. Let's install this. Okay, so let's go here to, where is it? Because the marketplace, install, right? Let's install this. Always allow marketplace to, yes, okay. Okay, ooh. Install, click the thing, what's going on? Let's do that, install. And let's see what it does for us, because this will allow us to sort of continue our exploration of the metadata, and then we can get on to, you know, doing some basic operations and maybe looking at some basic system query options as well. Okay, so we've got the core data services modeler thing. I think what we have to do now is grab some metadata to have a look at. So why don't we go back here and go back here to the metadata. Let's save that, save as Let's store it. Where are we? Let's store it in the same directory. Let's call it northwind.edmx. Okay. Northwind.edmx.xml. I didn't want it to do that, but anyway, let's go and change the name of that. Where is it? Northwind.edmx.xml. Let's rename it to get rid of that XML extension. What's going on there? Let's get rid of those. And now, if we have a metadata file, what we can do with it, get rid of that as well. We don't want that. This is what we were just looking at in the browser. Okay, but we can right-click, open with. Oh, where is it? What's going on? Northwind.edmx. We want to open that. Open with. It was supposed to come up with extensions. What's going on? Extensions. There. Core data services. Graphical modeler. Disabled. Right, in the CDS file extension, I thought you could do this. Oh, flatline. I will talk about filter if you want to. Yes, let's talk about filter. But this should. I've not even read the instructions yet. Install. Okay. The VS Code. All right. Okay. So before you use the CDS graphical model for VS Code, you need to install the sap.m.List CDS key in your local desktop. Oh, okay. I've got CDSDK. I've got that installed. Right. File open. Open with what? Why is it not working? Why is it not working? Northwind.edmx. Is it calling the right thing? Open with. Let's just restart it just to make sure. Exactly. $filter. Northwind.edmx. Open with. I don't know why it's not opening. Preview README. Maybe I do need to call it XML. I can't remember. XML. Open with. No. Let's rename it again. EDMX. Who can figure out what's going on here? What's going on? Why is it not working? Open with. Configure default editor. Oh, maybe I can do that. I did try this out when I first saw it earlier this week, and it was fine. And I've got rid of it. Uninstall. Reload required. Let's just fight with this one more time. The file extension has to be CDS. Oh, it has to be CDS. Thank you, John. Maybe it has to be CDS. But I'm sure I didn't call it CDS before. Anyway, so CDS graphical modeler. Core data service install. Come on. Right. Okay. So let's go. It's installed. Let's one more try with this first of all. Okay. Let's call it CDS. But CDS doesn't make sense because it's not CDS that's in there. That doesn't make sense to me. John, you're right. Too much haste. Open CDS files. Extensions are still low. This is not. Yeah. Maybe it's not. This is not the right one. Why? What? This is completely not right. Because it isn't CDS. It's EDMX. Oops. Northwind.cds. What? Northwind.edmx. Open with. I don't know. So the file extension has to be CDS. I don't think it has to be CDS. I did use this earlier this week, and maybe I've broken something by uninstalling it because I wanted to install it in front of you. Extensions are still loading. Too much haste. Open CDS files. Too much haste. Less speed. Exactly. It's expecting a CDS file though, rather than a metadata file. View this. So tell you what. Let me. Yeah, we've got time to mess around here. Core data services, uninstall. Wait, maybe I've looked up the wrong thing. I saw this. I've installed the wrong thing, I think. CDS graphical modeler. Core data services graphical install. Load required. What? Install. Right, let's do that. Come on. Install. Extension. CDS modeling. open with, right click this, yeah, you're right, right click the CDS file in *.cds file extension. 16th of the 5th. Yeah, that was when I installed it, so it's not changed since then. Install. Yes, Chesh says it works if you open schema.cds. But Peter is asking the question, this is what I'm trying to make it do, does it support EDMX modeling? Yes, it does. I mean, it just supports the display. I actually saw it with my own eyes earlier this week. Look at the extension README. I'm loath to sort of dig in, spend any more time on this because this is not what I wanted to sort of dig into. So let's just put this blog, I think I shared the blog post tonight. Yeah, I'll put the blog post there, see if you can get it installed and have a look. But I don't know what's going on. I've used it. I've used it. Okay, let's just go one more time here. Here. Northwind.edmx, open with, no idea. It was working. Can it be the OData CSDL Modeler? OData CSDL Modeler. OData CSDL Modeler. Is it that one? View OData. Maybe this is what I mean. Maybe I'm installing the wrong thing. So let's go here now. Thank you, Antonio. That might be what it is. Northwind.edmx. Right click, open with. There it is. OData CSDL Modeler. There we go. That's what we want. Thank you, team. Thank you, everybody. We're learning by doing. DJ is installing the wrong thing. He's no idea what he's doing. There we go. So there's nothing wrong with either extension. I was just installing the wrong extension. Thank you, Antonio. The extension that you need. Exactly. Yes. So that was a bit of a around the houses thing. But what we were just looking at in the metadata here, instead of looking at the XML, but I do encourage you to sort of stare at the XML and get used to staring at it. MD Farhan Alam, hearts to you too. Instead of staring at the XML, you can instead install the right extension, DJ, and save the file as EDMX, save the metadata, and it'll give you a beautiful display. Okay, so that's really cool. So thank you for the reminder to go in there, Javier. So I hope that, a little bit of information there. Isn't the graphical display coming with the elements extension automatically? You don't need yeah, so this extension is specifically for having a look at EDMX files. So let's go back to talk about Flatline's question or statement. I stopped the thing, didn't I? Let me just open up a new terminal. New terminal. Let's go there. Let's just close that. In fact, let's close that. There we go. And CDS run. So let's start the thing up again and get rid of the $top equals 11. So there we got our entity set. And we also said products 3 is a single entity. Note the different shape. Is it worth having a look at the different shapes in XML format? Because that's also super interesting. However, just as a brief comment to Flatline's comment, the new way, which is, I think, feels nicer, and in terms of sort of a data hierarchy in the path info of the URL, feels nicer as well, /3. There we go. So with OData v4, I think it was with OData v4, you can now specify the key for a single entity with / instead of putting it in brackets. Now, there are various OData operations, okay? A little bit like get, put, post, and delete, but there's also the operation query, okay? So query, and this is why you'll see CRUD+Q in certain OData related documentation: create, read, update, delete, and query. And these operations, these OData operations, map onto HTTP verbs. And we've just seen 2 of these operations in action. We've seen the read operation just now. That is a read operation. Give me one single entity. But we're also doing, we can also do a query in terms of give me potentially multiple entities. So here, effectively, it's a bit of a read, but effectively it's a query. And a query becomes even more understandable as a query if we do a $filter. Okay, yeah, it is beautiful. It is Flatline, it is beautiful. So let's start by playing around with one of the things that somebody mentioned. Was it you? Flatline? Filter, $filter. So in OData defines a number of so-called system query options. And we saw one when we go back here. We saw one right at the very start. Let's go back to the landing page and hit. Let's choose categories instead, right? Let's choose categories. We saw this thing here. Question mark, $sign. I think it is just V4. I might be wrong. It might be V3 as well, but V4 is where it really sort of came into being, I think. Question mark, $top equals 11. Now, 11, again, is another beautiful quirk of the designers of the Cap Papa. So 11 is just one of their favorite numbers. If you look at some of the CAP documentation and the examples, string length will be like 1111 or 11 or whatever. Okay, so it's just ones. So top can be a number. Top equals 5. Top 5, right? So you have the structure of a URL, of course, is you have the scheme, HTTP, for example. Then you have the host name, localhost in this case. Then you may have a port, 4004. Then you've got to have a path or path info, which is anything after the first slash, all the way up to the end, where the end is defined by a question mark. Sometimes you'll have a hash as well, but that we're not going to. It's a page fragment that's used also sometimes in single page apps. We won't go there. And then you have a number of. You have the query string, okay, which you can convey in a GET request in HTTP as part of the URL. And in the query string, there are certain query parameters defined in the OData specification, and they all begin with a $sign to sort of make them stand out, to separate them out from any other non-OData query parameters that you might be using, okay? Jonah says, isn't that syntax already implemented in OData v4? It might be. I've really only seen it or started to use it with OData v4, but it might be in v2. I'll have to dig into that. I'm not sure. So yeah, fair point, Jonas. It might have been in v2 as well. I've just seen this question from Rainer. Should I use v4 or v2 for UI5 freestyle apps? Nico says it really depends on the back end you consume. CAP is v4 out of the box, but there is a v2 adapter. If you're building an app from scratch, I personally think that you want to look at v4. Because V4, from an OData perspective, because it's a more refined version of the protocol, it has more features, and if you're building a UI5 based app anyway, there is a specific V4 version of the OData model that will take advantage of all those juicy V4 features. But of course, as Nico very rightly says, depends on what you're using to build and provide your OData service. If it's CAP, then yeah, v4, great, out of the box, done. But good question. So what we're looking at here is a system query option, $top. And we can sort of tell, if I say $top equals 1, for example, we can tell just by looking that this is saying, just give me the first one. Or $top equals 2, give me the first 2. Okay, so you can sort of restrict the response by using the $top. Okay, so we've got $filter as well. If I were to say, for example, let's go back to products. If I were to say, for example, and we're jumping a little bit far ahead, but we'll come back in a minute. But I just want to make sure that we cover this question mark, right? So question mark introduces the query string part of the URL, and then we have one or more query parameters with values. So the parameter name is $filter, which is an OData system query option. Okay, and then we have an equals sign because that's part of the URL specification for a query string, and then we have an expression that is a valid filter system query option expression. And if we say, for example, how about we got this Boolean discontinued flag to say whether a product is discontinued or not, not available anymore, not being produced anymore, whatever, right? So why don't we say discontinued equals false. Now I'm putting spaces in the URL here. I shouldn't really URL encode but Chrome as a browser is very forgiving and will automatically do the right thing. But let's just do this so we can see it. Discontinued equals false. Now, we can't really tell the difference because, in fact, the first 3 products here are discontinued. Look here. But then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8 product ID 8, 10. 10. So there we go. Product ID 9 is not there because product ID 9, if we looked at product ID 9, let's bring that out, get a second, /9, we can see that is not discontinued. So that filter, there's an example of a really powerful, we're just scratching the surface with the power of the filter system query option, but we can sort of see how these system query options work. We could even say here, ampersand, again, that's part of the query string syntax. So you can join multiple query name and value parameter pairs together with an ampersand. So a question mark introduces them, then you join them with ampersands. Ampersand $top equals 2. Give me the top 2 discontinued products, as in not in the most popular, but just give us the first 2 discontinued products. There we go. So we can combine system query options. So with that in mind, it's 8:41. Let's spend the last 20 minutes stepping back for a second, and rather than just me making up some random system query options to play around with, which we'll do next week, let's have a look what the OData model in UI5 will do for us and what's happening underneath. So because in my day when I was hacking around with UI5, I was doing a lot of debugging and I wanted to understand what was going on with my apps as far as what it was doing to consume the OData service that I connected it to. So let's take a step back for a second. Okay, we'll stay within the basic operations of query and of get for now. Okay, but let's go back here. Let's go to the landing page and let's go to our simple app. So we can see our simple app, and in fact, let's just have a look at the simple app. And you don't need to know CAP. Don't worry if you don't know CAP. Let's just have a look at UI5. I'm just going to just show you this thing here. Okay, show you that there. I've got. Let me just make that smaller. How do I make that sort of? How to get rid of the? Oh, there we go. Yeah, perfect. There we can see the full screen. So I've got a very simple app that's got a single view, and the view is basically a page with a title, Northwind data, and that's this thing here, Northwind data. And I'm defining within the content of that page a list, and that list is this thing here, right? It's a list. And the items of that list, which is this so-called aggregation, it's a collection of things, collection, OData, entity set, right? It's all connected, right? I'm binding the items aggregation of this list control with what does that even mean, right? With a path, and it's an absolute path because it starts with a slash, to /products. Where have we seen /products before? We've seen /products there. And this is exactly what we're talking about here. We're binding the items aggregation in the list control to the products entity set. Okay, and there is a connection, right? We've got the default model here, and if I just very, very briefly look in the manifest.json, we can see the default model in this sort of JSON declaration of this app is pointing at the data source default, which is defined here as /Northwind model, and it's a version 4 OData type of data source. Okay, so this all you can study this this is all in the repo. Oh, lots of conversations here. So Nico is saying you might have more ways of controlling V2 client side, but I have nothing but good experience with V4 and its support in UI5. Absolutely. So Peter, maybe forward the feedback to rename the extensions. Yes. I think I'll speak to the chap that wrote that blog post and go from there. But yeah, that's a good feedback actually. So Rainer is saying, I need read data in the controller and then work with the results in the controller. Okay, so Nico is having a conversation with Rainer. I will let that happen. And instead, I will go to Andrew. So we could define a filter here in our path. Hard coded. Yes, you could. You could define so this is what you mean here. You could define a filter hard coded in here if you wanted to. Let's try that next time, okay? But for now, let's just bind the product entity set. These are important words that bind the product entity set to the items aggregation. And then for every entity in that entity set, stamp it out with a standard list item control, which is one of my favorite controls in UI5, and bind the title element of the standard list item control to the value of the product name property. Remember, product metadata. If we have a look at the products, we've got product name as a string. It's a string type, and it's part of the entity type for products. Okay, so we're binding the value of the product name property. Notice that this is relative. It hasn't got a slash to start, so this is relative to the products entity set. And in the description, quantity per unit. I just wanted a string, quantity per unit. So if you look at the products here, quantity per unit, it's sort of interesting, something interesting to look at. Okay, so with that in mind, what have we got? If we go back here, localhost 4004, look at the simple app. Oh, it's there anyway, right? We have chai. In fact, let's open up a new window and localhost 4004. There we go. And look at the products. We can see chai 10 boxes by 20 bags, Chang 24 12-ounce bottles, aniseed syrup, etc., etc., etc. Now, so we can see that we're consuming this OData service. The OData model mechanism in UI5 is consuming this OData service just like that, because we just declaratively bound that thing. Now, but how does that even work? Let's have a look what's going on so we can then start to understand what OData operations and system query options are being used in the background on our behalf by the OData model. So let's open up with F12, our wonderful Chrome developer tools, and let's see what's going on. Shall we see what's going on? Are we all ready to dive in here? If we refresh this, there's a lot of stuff that's loaded, okay, which is fine. It's all part of the UI5 library stuff. But if we filter Northwind, let's filter on network requests down to those just containing the word Northwind. And we can see, of course, we've got three, because they're all /Northwind-model, okay? Path, exactly, yes. So fantastic, thank you, Nico. That's exactly how we'll try that next week, how we add specific system query options like filter to the binding information, okay? So you can do that. Now, we got three calls. Let's just refresh that again. Bong, bong, bong. Three calls. We get a get request to what? To the metadata. Let's have a look at the response. There's the metadata. And of course, when we first sort of initialize the app and we've told the app that it has a default data service, which is an OData v4 data service, it will instantiate for us an OData v4 model mechanism, which, and if we, in fact, I think if we look at the initiator, we can see here in the instantiation of the OData model, it says, oh, I need to go and get the metadata. And, you said you want to consume this OData service, so I, OData model, need to go and find out about that service. So it's that context that goes and requests the metadata. Okay, so we can see here, we've got the headers, and this is the request URL that was sent. Localhost 4004, Northwind model, $metadata. We've got the SAP language, 6N, I think, is the SAP language code for the English UK locale, based on my browser. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's what it is. And we do a get, okay? What's this next one? Let's close this. The next one, this is a bit weird because it's just a head request, okay? We're not going to dig into this too much, but it makes so the OData model makes another request and just uses the HTTP head method, which just says, give me the headers of a response that I'm making. That, you know, it's like making a GET request, but you say, I don't want the body, I don't want the payload, just give me the headers. Okay, that's HTTP head. Okay, and that just out of interest is all about asking for CSRF cross-system request forgery tokens. It's saying, I would like to start making requests, and I want to sort of partake in talking to you, dear backend, about a token that I can use, okay, on future requests where I want to make a non-read-only request. But we won't go into, this is related but not directly related to cause, which we talked about last week. It's all about the security aspects. Okay, but the most important request that's made is this thing called $batch. Who knows what $batch is? Okay, we're looking somewhere for what we think is going to be an OData query operation, which is requesting the product's entity set. So we can go and grab the data and then bind all the values to the control so it displays nicely like this. But what we find is not a call to /products here. We'd be looking for /Northwind /dash model /products, wouldn't we normally? But we don't find it. By default, this is a fantastic conversation going on, by the way, so thank you for all the conversation, but I'll just carry on with this for now because I want to get to the end of this bit here before 9 minutes to go. We have this $batch. So OData has a concept of being able to bundle up multiple requests to save on network, to save on bandwidth, to save on round trips and everything, to be efficient. Okay, and by default, that is the mode that the OData v4 model has switched on automatically. Because normally, you want things to go fast, right? And you're not interested in opening up the Chrome developer tools and looking at the individual OData operations that are going on. But let's just understand what this batch thing is. If we look at the payload that's sent in this OData batch operation, we can, well, first of all, in fact, let's look at the headers. We can see in the request headers, look at this, content type, multi-part mix. What the heck is that? That just means I'm going to send you multiple parts, multiple chunks, okay, that all potentially have their different content types, okay? This is like a bundling up of different content typed things in one go, in one request. And I'm going to bundle them up. I'm going to have a little separator that I've just made up that's random, and that separator is the boundary, which is this random string here. So when we look at the payload, okay, we can see there's the separator, dash dash batch ID, random thing here, batch ID, random thing here. Now, the super important thing we can see here is that within this batched up request, there get products $select equals da da da, right? There is our OData operation. There's our OData query operation. So Andrew says, so batch is like a bucket of requests all sent at once. Perfect explanation. That's exactly what it is. Why is the batch request method a post, not a get? Patrick, you're a person after my own heart. I also have this question, and it's a long-standing question. It's basically for consistency, because you can also batch up, not destructive, but you can also batch up requests that have side effects, okay, that change state on the server, as in that create or update or replace or delete resources, okay? So it's in my mind, it's a little bit, this edge case is a little bit ugly, but it has to be post because potentially the unviewable bucket of requests, to use Andrew's phrase, potentially has side effects, okay? And that means that we don't want to, let any intermediate servers think they can cache the response from these sorts of things. It's all about HTTP. But brilliant question, Peter. Brilliant question. Oh, sorry, a brilliant question, Patrick. So Peter says, because it's sending text as a body. Sort of. I mean, yeah, you're sending a payload as well. But yeah, you can actually send a payload technically with get. Anyway, that's HTTP. So what we can do though is to make this a little bit easier for ourselves. Okay, what we can go across to here in our manifest, right? In our manifest, where is it? There. The way you turn off batching in v4 in UI5 is different to the way you turn off batching in v2. Use batch true, use batch false in the v2 model, but in v4 you can change the group ID to direct. Okay, if we look at the UI5 SDK OData model, you will see here in the constructor. Yes, so John is correct as well. It's also because we're sending stuff in the payload. Theoretically, you can send stuff in a payload of the GET request. It's not normal, but anyway, as in you can send query in the payload. Post it's sort of yeah, exactly. So exactly, Andrew. Given all requests in batch don't have to be gets. Exactly. So if we look at this, the definition, make that a little bit bigger. Ooh, there. The definition of here in the constructor, direct sends requests directly without batch. So now I've changed this from auto to direct. I put this group ID in explicitly so I can change it sort of on live stream. So now let us go back here and refresh this. Let's see what happens. Should we see what happens? Refresh. There we go. We've got now a slightly more understandable, dig-inable way of looking at what's going on with our OData requests. So here we can see we've got the thing that was in the batch before is now sort of, a first-class network request that was made, okay? This, of course, is, not efficient for production because it's going to make requests, one by one each time, but it helps us get our brain around it, okay? Query string parameters. Now, the query string parameters that were sent, in fact, if I double-click on this, that's exactly the OData operation that was made, or the URL relating to the OData operation that was made. And we can see, and it's spread out beautifully here for us to have a look at, we can see that it sends 3 query string parameters. And these are all beginning with $, so we know that they're OData system query options. We have $top, give us the first 100. We've seen top already. Start at the beginning, don't jump ahead, don't skip any, skip equals 0. And select, so this is a very refined, so when we did before we go here, right? Notice if I leave off the $select, let's remove that for a second. Right, if we just do the skip and the top without the select, we get the same number of results. In fact, let's just add the thing, ampersand $count equals true. We can ask for count in line, as it were. Here we get 77. Okay, we still get 77. Go back here, ampersand $count equals true. Give me the count in the response as well, 77. However, we get a reduced payload back because we've only asked for specific. We've asked for specific properties. So the OData model knows what binding, right? Where's the binding? Knows what things we've got in the binding. We've got the product name and the quantity per unit. So asks specifically only for the product name and the quantity per unit. It also asks for the product ID because that's the key. Okay, saving bandwidth. So, you get these sort of GraphQL evangelists. It's like, REST and OData is rubbish because you're so verbose and everything. You can't read. This is just scratching the surface of the sorts of things that you can do with OData. You can bring in data from related entities as well in the data model. We don't even got there yet, right? So this now tells us, don't skip any. Give us the first 100. This 100 value comes from the OData model. It's the default prefetch size. and give me select just the product ID, product name, and quantity per unit. Okay. So finally, for you to play around with, I've also deliberately added this growing parameter in here. So growing equals true, let's save that. And if I refresh that now, right, growing is for lists with lots of data bound to it. And now if we scroll down there, we don't get 100, we get a number. Certain number is 20, by the way. I'll tell you why in a minute. And then we get this more, okay? And we can click on more to go and get. So let's have a look at this thing here. This thing, skip 0, top 20. But when I press more, okay? Oh, did I press more? Let's close that there. What's going on? Skip top 20, Northwind, more. There we go, there it is there. Skip 20, next 20. Scroll down, more. Skip 40, the next 20, and so on. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock. I can't believe this time has gone so fast, right? Hopefully this gives us the baseline to start playing around with understanding what OData operations are being called by our simple app, and using those as a springboard to start digging in a little bit more to $filter, $select, $skip, $top, $search. Okay, and then we can move on to even more parts of the basic operations to start creating and updating data as well. I hope that was okay. Yeah, that time went really fast, so have a great rest of the day. I've got a dash as well, sorry John, and yeah, I'll see you this time next week. We'll continue exactly where we left off. Don't forget, if you've not subscribed already, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, there we go. We'll look at lots of different things, including Andrew's question there. How does sorting and skipping interact? Why was it 20 by default? Patrick, look at the growing feature of the list. 20 is the default. You can modify that as well. Okay, bye for now.